We're continuing our conversation with many of the major leaders here in the state capitol. Senator Michael Gianaris is here. He represents Astoria, Long Island City, and so many other areas in Queens, including Sunnyside. A lot to talk about with you, Senator. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the MTA first. You've been all over this. The crisis is very, very real, and your constituents are feeling it right where it hurts.
Yeah, we're a commuter neighborhood. All of my neighborhoods, we're just across the East River from Manhattan, the Central Business District, and a lot of people rely on the subways. And the crisis is real. We don't have to tell the people watching that, but unfortunately, we have to tell some of the people up here about it because their heads are in the sand about the problems we're facing. And we are trying desperately in this coming year to make sure that we acquire the resources necessary for the MTA to do what's necessary to improve service, improve the signals that are the cause of so many of the delays, buy new subway cars, do all the things that are needed to get things on the right track for once.
Right. You said their heads are in the sand. What do you mean by that? They're not supporting you on this issue?
Well, a lot of the elected officials who are not from the city or the immediate area don't really fathom a mass transit system that large and what the needs of the system are. Their communities don't necessarily, other than being tourists in the city, don't feel it on a day-to-day basis, and there's a lot of education that has to go into it. The events of last year now, 2017, really put a spotlight on how bad things are. We had derailments, we had these horror stories.
Right, and the delays are out of control.
Right, and it's finally getting to the point where the need is now grown and everyone has realized what we have to do. And now it's a question of what's the solution, and that's the challenging part that we face going to this budget season.
Right, so we have two options, congestion pricing, right, or the Millionaires Tax. Which is more likely from your vantage point?
Well, so many things here don't fall into neat categories like that. So there have been two proposals. One is a congestion pricing concept that we have no details about. So I want to wait and see, what are they talking about? Are they talking about charging fees for for-hire vehicles? Are they talking about tolls on the bridges? Are they talking about a fee to enter certain parts of Manhattan? We don't have
all of which are unpopular.
Right. We don't have any meat on the bones of even what we're talking about in that respect. I have proposed, I know the mayor also supports the idea that we should, at least in part, get some resources from those who can most afford, people who are doing very well in our city, the top 1% of income earners, to help provide some money. In the end, as so often happens in this town, in Albany, the solution ends up being some kind of combination of different ideas. So the budget process is going to have a lot to do with that. We're waiting for the governor's details that should emerge in the next couple of weeks, and we'll take it from there. But the bottom line is, whatever the answer is, we need to do something. The need is more desperate than quibbling over the details of how to get there. We need an infusion of resources for the MTA. And then, by the way, we also have to make sure the MTA is spending it wisely, which they haven't been doing. Right now, right in Astoria, we have two stations that are closed for a beautification project that is doing nothing to improve the service of the subway lines. It's just going to make the stations more attractive. They're going to provide some Wi-Fi, which I guess is of value, but they're closing these stations for 8 months at a time, spending hundreds of millions of dollars. No buses to help people deal with this closure. And more importantly, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, or the MTA is, and we're not improving service or accessibility at these stations. So we got to get them, if we get them the money, we have to make sure they're spending it correctly.
Right, and there's also rumblings, Senator, of a Millionaires Tax. Now, the issue with that is, what if it drives our high earners out of the state? Can we afford that?
That's always a concern. Most studies indicate that doesn't really happen. The wrinkle that we're facing today is the federal tax changes are going to have a profound impact. So we're still taking a look at how that might impact what we're doing in New York. So we have to think about that in the context of everything that's happening nationwide right now. We certainly don't want to lose people from the state, but there's got to be a way to do this. For example, there's a huge corporate tax cut that's happened. So whether it's a Millionaires Tax or going after the big corporations, there's got to be certain ways to claw that income back and use it for things we need.
Right. Let's talk about Democratic unity. That's something I talked about with Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. How likely is it from your point of view?
I don't want to analyze how likely it is. I want to talk about how necessary it is. And right now we're facing a crisis in this country because Washington is bearing down on democratic states in particular. And some of the policies are so counter to the values, the progressive values we have in New York, that we're losing an opportunity here to stand up and assert ourselves. California, by the way, has a fully democratic legislature, democratic governor, and they are leading the nation in so many ways, even taking some ideas that our members have proposed and passing them in California, which is great for them. But we are missing the opportunity. We have a majority of the Senate as elected Democrats, or we will. There's 2 vacancies that will be filled shortly. And we don't have a Democratic majority. So we can't pass things that are important, like criminal justice reform, or repairs to the MTA and reforms to the MTA, or electoral reforms, or protecting women's reproductive rights. There are so many things that are just laying by the wayside because we have a minority of senators, meaning the Republicans, who are actually wielding the gavel and making decisions when that's not what the people voted for.
Do you feel the leadership is doing what it takes to bring unity?
I think we've got more hope today than we've had in many years.
2 years ago. Right.
So I know we have, as a conference, under Andre Stewart-Cousin's leadership, agreed to this framework. I believe that the independent Democrats have also agreed to it. The rubber will meet the road after these special elections, which should happen in the next few months.
In March, right.
And then we'll find out who's serious about it and who's not.
Right. Well, let's talk about criminal justice reform. Rikers Island is in your district. We finally, after a lot of talk for a long time, we have part of it closing. Is that enough? And is it moving fast enough?
No, it should have been closed many years ago, so it's certainly not moving fast enough. And just to clarify, it's just outside my district, but very close to my home.
Right.
So I've grown up
right
around
on the border.
Rikers.
Right,
correct.
Right.
It should close as soon as possible. I visited Rikers a couple of months ago and spoke with some of the inmates and saw the conditions. Everyone agrees it's horrible. People go in there as young men, usually, some women, but many young men, and they come out with their lives ruined because of the experiences they had, oftentimes for nonviolent offenses. They're in there waiting for trial for the most part, so they haven't even been convicted of anything yet, and you're having lives like Khalif Browder, whose story everybody knows, that get ruined by the experience there. It would be much more conducive to have smaller jails throughout the city, which is, I know, what the mayor has proposed. He's proposed it over a 10-year time frame. I'd like to see it as quickly as humanly possible. It's good that progress has already started in that front.
Right, and the last time you were on our show, you talked about cash bail reform, and that's a top priority for you in 2018.
Yeah, and they're not unrelated. The people who are sitting at Rikers are, for the most part,
go hand in hand.
People who are there because they cannot afford bail. Right. Overwhelmingly, I think about 85% of the Rikers population is awaiting trial. These are not people who have been convicted of anything at this point, and they are simply there because they can't afford their bail. And so if we achieve bail reform, that will do a great deal towards reducing the Rikers population, make it easier to close it faster. So these things are all interrelated. The important thing to remember about bail and why it should go is that the system, by definition, penalizes those who are too poor. And we should not have any financial consideration playing a role in whether someone is free or not free, especially in a pre-conviction scenario. So 2 people commit the same exact crime, or are alleged to have committed the same exact crime. One has money and one doesn't. One is walking the streets, and the other one is rotting in Rikers. So it's a horrible system. It has no, it turns the innocent until proven guilty concept on its head. We have people who are guilty until proven rich, is what it comes down to, because if they don't have money to pay their way out, they're sitting in jail.
Wow. You have a busy year. Thanks for your time today.
It's good to see you up here.